Alright, Lego is back again with a new project, and this time I'm trying a new experiment out, as it were, in some 2D, 3D work. Well, not really 3D, pseudo 3D, trying to make it look like 3D, essentially. So I had an idea, and it required the TARDIS. So what I did was sit down and start tracing it manually using the mosaic effect. I also did on the shard project and a few earlier projects as well when I've done 2D shadows. It gives me a lot of control, and I needed to divide this into two halves. You'll see why later on. But first off, at this stage, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just going with my gut, and I didn't actually have any plan yet as to which shapes I actually needed and how I was going to manipulate those later. So I'm using a do first, think later approach right now, and in hindsight, I've wasted about an hour doing this because it turns out the effect that this would achieve was not really what I wanted, or at least it didn't look as good once I actually made it compared to what I thought it would be. So, but at this point, I'm tracing the bits and pieces, and it's no secret it's going to come up a lot in this project. But the idea here is to take half the TARDIS, flatten it, make it 2D. The other half stays 3D ish, and it all comes down to my skills, whether or not I can actually pull that off believably in Inkscape, which is, of course, a 2D program. There is no 3D whatsoever in here, except for the rendering of polygons, but that's a can of worms I don't really want to get into. So what you saw me doing there was a little test, and I didn't like the result, or at least it wasn't usable to me the way I created those shapes. So I took another shot at it with a flat TARDIS this time, because as you're about to see here, once I do my little test in a moment, I can then take that half and then mold that back into pseudo 3D, and that is sort of the effect that I was hoping for initially. So this is my little first demo here, taking a flat TARDIS, modeling up the panels, and then taking that shape, and then using some perspective magic, pulling that back into 3D space. And I looked at it for a while, and I wasn't really happy with it, or at least it looked a little silly, and it didn't really give the appearance that I was going for with this project. So I instead tried to go back to scratch and then just take these 2D panels of the TARDIS exterior that you're looking at right now, and then instead of just making half of it and then mirroring that was done for a quick test. I'm now trying to actually make the whole front. And at this stage, my idea, I think, was to make all the panels, then make one half 3D and one half stays 2D. But I wasn't really sure which was which at this point, and I wasn't sure if the 3D pseudo effects would actually be like my attempt at perspectives, or if it would just be like flat 2D effects, giving the appearance of 3D. I'm rambling a bit, but it'll make sense, I hope, once I actually get to doing the 3D and 2D effects. So for now, I'm just detailing the TARDIS front as I see it, making the little telephone box panel text there, and just in the ballpark of the real one. The exterior dimensions and the appearances change from doctor to doctor, so I'm not too concerned with getting everything just right. I'm just getting most of the rough shapes in order, so I'm tracing some of the center text up there, just going off of the overall shape of the text and the spaces in between. I'm just roughly eyeballing a middle ground to satisfy that, more or less. So At this point, I'm just making it as detailed as I dare, and then I'll figure out later on what level of detail I actually need, because it's easier to do that while in 2D. Once I start going into 3D territory-ish, it'll be way harder to go back and add details, because I will lose my neutral 2D appearance. At least that's the idea. So at any point in this video, if I say 3D in any way, all I mean is how can I make 2D effects that make it look like it's 3D. So it's always pseudo 3D in this video. No actual 3D models appear, I swear. Now, making up the little light there at the top. And considering the amount of detail and the scale of this project, I'm going way too much into the overall shape of this. There's no need to be this detailed at all, but I figured while I was at it, why not? I might actually just need it. And in any case, if I ever need a TARDIS for a project again, I'll have a fully rendered, fully decked out TARDIS exterior to play with. So it'll be a nice asset for the future, maybe. So I figured, why not? Why not just do it right the first time? And then that's it. So what you're seeing here is a little bit of an experiment with some of the interpolation tools that Inkscape has, because I was trying to think ahead for the text, and you'll see me try that again later, but basically I'm just asking it to interpolate a bunch of times from one step to another, and this gives the appearance of, well, if not 3D, then at least a smooth transition. And I thought maybe I could use that to give the appearance of 3D. In hindsight, it didn't really work out, but it's nice to know you have that option. So, having made the elements of the TARDIS in vector graphics, now it's time to start laying the groundwork for the actual appearance. So I'm taking some of the panels and I'm deciding on their rough colors. Because of the different depths that I'm trying to mimic here, I need just a little difference in the color tones all the times. So I'm just starting off making everything blue or white-ish. I tend to not really like white, like completely white, because it looks too bland and too flat. So I'm using some off the walls almost white. I think some yellowish, really pale yellowish color to really to add it to stand in for the white. And the idea here is to get the rough color work done, and then I can start like honing in on the specific nuances that I need to make everything look like it belongs to the same object basically, but the subtle differences will be the differences in depth only. That's the idea. That's the hope anyway. Now there is some text on the actual door on the right side there, and I was too lazy to look up what it actually is, because no one's going to be able to read it anyway. It's going to be too small for the pixelation. So I was a little cheeky, and instead I just wrote TARDIS on the door handle there. And I was even too lazy to actually write it in Gallifreyan, which is a new low for me. But I was really lazy here, so I actually took the font that another awesome scribe made and just put that on there. It'll be a little Easter egg of some sort. So having done the rough colors now, it's time to really dig in and actually do this, because it still looks way too bright and too fake. I want a little darker TARDIS. So I'm taking the interpolation tool again, just giving me a rough color palette to work with here. And having established that I want the light source to be on the left side as shown there with the yellow bulb of the sun, it's time to really get technical about the actual colors. So now I have a concrete color palette to pick from, and I can ensure they're consistent across left and right until I need them to not be. But for the moment, I haven't still decided yet which side is 3D and which side is 2D, so I'm just going all out. yeah, just adding some details again. Um, there's a nice saying about artwork in general that I really like, and it's the idea that artwork is never finished, it's just abandoned. So you can keep adding small, minute details, textures, gradients. Like if you really were to try harder, you would put textures and everything, you would put mesh gradients and everything, and you would do all sorts of fancy shadow work. Um, like there's no limit to how detailed you could sit down and make this, but there's a lot of diminishing returns involved. At some point, it just becomes too tedious, and the details will be so minute that you can't even really see it anyway. So I'm sticking to this for now because I have decided that the left side here is going to be the 3D side. So I'm going, well, not all out, but I'm doing my best in the time available to me to make that look more detailed and more nuanced than the flat counterpart. So what I'm doing right now is I am splitting up the text so it goes on the right side. And can I just take a moment to say, I don't think I like the fact that the public call is not centered, but apparently it isn't. So maybe that's just a particular photo I found, but it looks fine, but it is a little weird that it's not in the center. So now the fancy side has a bit of a glow in it because the text is actually lighting up. Um, so that's what you're seeing me do right now, just adding some glow, a little bit of a lightsaber effect in the background. Um, and in general, there's just a lot of gradients going on here. Now for the door panel itself, I could not leave it at a simple gradient because that would be too simple. It wouldn't really give the depth that I needed. So instead I made a complicated looking mesh gradient, but it's really not complicated at all. You can see I just put the nodes near the actual frames, and then I just made that color a little bit darker. It's really simple, but it gives a lot, I think. Now for the individual panels, just a little bit of a gradient as well. Easy peasy. And now in a moment I'll be a little bit lazy again, because there is a built-in tool in Inkscape for making drop shadows, and you have limited control over them. But if you're just in a pinch, or you don't want to bother with making your own shadows with the clip group effects or the different tools you have available for making embedded vector graphics and stuff. So if point is, you can make drop shadows in a pinch if you're just lazy. And I started out doing that, but then I realized I did need shadows on all four sides, so I eventually just made the real deal anyway. But at the time I made that, it seemed like a nice idea to just skip some time and get an effect instantly. But in hindsight, I should have just done the clip group from the start because I ended up doing that anyway. So that's what you're seeing me do right now. I'm just adding some quick and dirty drop shadows to some of the inset panels here to give them some extra depth. And then I'm making up for that lazy work by actually having to make real shadowy overlays anyway, because it is only one side of that effect. It doesn't go on both sides. So that's the moral lesson, I guess. If you know you need more shadows than one, just go ahead and bite the apple and do it right. Because those effects don't stack. On the plus side, it is a nice exercise if you're not used to using clip groups, and I consider myself pretty good at them at this point, but I'm still, it always takes just a moment to remember how the hierarchy goes for inserting stuff into a layer, and then a clip group, and then into the group inside the clip group. But it all worked out in the end, and it gives off this really nice idea of the shadows there. And at this point, I'm still trying to avoid making the clip group with some mesh gradients, but they don't work like that. So now I've just bitten the apple. Now you're seeing me actually lay in the set clip group inside. And with this effect, I could have just deleted the drop shadow. I didn't do that because that way I have a variable shadow, which, if anyone asks, is totally the point of this. So I did not waste any time. But there we are. Clip groups almost done. Just 3 panels in all, so it's fairly quick to do. If you did that for every panel, I can see how that take time. But for those 3 simple panels, it was absolutely worth it. Now for the rest of these, I'm just going to take advantage of the fact that they're individual mosaic elements, and then I'll just make some flat lines as shadows over or under as appropriate. So no need to go in depth on any of this. And at this stage, I figured that the 3D side should really get a better light. So I made some, I call them glow stick effects, but it's just stacked blurs. Tried to see what I could come up with there in terms of making that side fancier. And I don't know at this point how I'm going to make the actual light glow, because there's a variety of ways you can do that, and there's a variety of ways you can make that work. But it all depends on the text and the composition and what's the background color going to be. I don't know. I have no idea. How much do I want to obscure the TARDIS itself? I don't know. So I'll leave that off for now, making the quick and dirty handle there. This is just a circular gradient, but I could have, probably maybe should have, made a mesh gradient to actually encompass the ends of the handle as well as just the flat side. But again, it's about details. No one's going to look that hard at the handle, so it'll be good enough for now. Now I'm just taking a few of the colors and making them match the other side, so it doesn't look as clashing once you look at the two halves. But they're still meant to be separate, so it's not meant to be a completely smooth transition from one side to the other. It is still going to need to have a little bit of a jarring differences. So that's why I also deleted the light from the right side again, because it looked too smooth. I need the right side to be sort of rough and flat and not pretty. Now I tried briefly toying with the idea of making a tapered roof, but it didn't really look right, so I skipped that. So at this point, I'm trying one of the last few things I wanted to try and do. I was toying a bit with the idea of making a wooden grain texture on the on the left side, to really sell the idea that this is the real deal. This is not a 2D. This is the real TARDIS here. And it took me a while to figure out if I wanted to actually make a mask texture on top, or if I wanted to just make a vector texture and then just plopping that on top of it. And again, this is about details. You could do this on individual panels. You could make it really good, fit every single line and edge and whatever you wanted. But no one's going to look that close at it anyway. And frankly, I didn't really want to, because we're talking about, I don't know, some 30-ish different mosaic panels. That's just going to be a lot of textures, and it's going to be a lot of stuff that I could do without, frankly. So I made a quick and dirty grab of a texture, made it vector graphics, and then I took a shape of the TARDIS that I wanted to imprint this on, made that imprint fit the actual edge of the TARDIS, because I was stupid and didn't have that lined up properly. And that's what you're seeing me toying me right now. I'm trying to see if I can make this believable, but without the hassle of really making that fit every single frame. So I'm just having the same color. I'm making up for that by making it partially transparent, but nonetheless, it is not it's not really, it adds no depth the way it could have. But instead, I will say it does give a little bit of detailing. Not a lot, and that's deliberate, but just a little bit to just make it seem a little bit more alive, a little bit more used, not so flat and boring. And I did the same for the light inside. Instead of just a perfectly flat color inside, I made a little bit of just a little bit of noise inside that to just add something, so it wasn't so flat. So now I'm trying to look at a little bit of the light, and one thing I want at this point is I don't want any light on the 2D side because, well, there shouldn't be light. So at this stage, I'm not entirely sure how ugly or pretty it's going to be, but I know I don't want any light on the right side. So no matter how ugly it becomes, that's what I'm going with. And I found that the easiest way to make something is to make it graded and then cut it in half afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to have to fiddle with the gradients with only half the shape available, and it'll fit to that shape. It's just easier to make the shape you want after you've made the gradient, because that way it stays intact. All right, so that was the fancy part, so to speak. Now we just quick and dirty and going over the actual 2D side of the TARDIS, and I don't know how I'm going to put this, so I'm just going to say it. It looks too 3D for it to be 2D, so it wasn't ugly enough, so to speak. So I tried a few different ideas for how I could make that look more like a drawing and less like the real 3D thing. So the first thing I did, I added back a lot of the strokes because that looks more cartoonish with the black outlines everywhere. Even though it's not that bad actually, and you can see I'm making a bunch of backups down the line where I am going to whenever I make a new iteration. But at this stage, I didn't see there wasn't enough difference between the 2D and 3D, so I tried a different tactic, and that was to make it like go completely back to a draft stage, not even finished drawing. So that's what you see me do here. I'm fiddling around with the hatch. No, not the hatch. Sorry, the what is that effect? I can't even remember. I think it's just a sketch effect, something like that. And the idea here is now to the idea has evolved now to go from a draft to a 3D effect. So the entire right side is going to become a drawing, basically. Not even a 2D, but just completely a drawing. No color, no nothing. So that's what you're seeing me doing right now. I'm just making a backup really quick, and then I am putting that into effect by erasing all the 3D, no, sorry, all the mosaic elements of the right side, sorry, and seeing what I can make of that. Now, when done right, this tool in particular, the sketch tool, can really make something look, well, hand drawn is one aspect. It works better for rigid shapes rather than organics, because if you have organic shapes, it's quickly going to look like one big haystack of small lines. It's not dealing too well with that. But as far as rigid, flat, and straight lines go, this was pretty much perfect. So having done this and deciding that this was 2D, 3D enough, you can't get much more 2D than just a sketch. So now there is a really good contrast between the left and right side, and there's no doubt as to which side is which. Having done that, it's time to make the text, and there's not really a lot to it. It's just the word flatline, because that's the inspiration for this episode and this project, in case that was not clear yet. So I'm just making a quick little test here of the proto-text, figuring out the sizes and the thicknesses that I want. And I had ideas for the text, harking back to the interpolation tool we looked at earlier. So I'm making it very thick no thin lines anywhere, because I want to have some fill, so to speak, to work with. Um, so yeah, just a little bit of a line work for the letters. And at this stage, I also need to start thinking about the background, because the light the TARDIS gives off at the top needs to be visible. And if it needs to be visible, then I'm going to need a dark background. And if I'm going to have a dark background, I'm going to have to figure out how the colors are going to go off of that. Um, so that's what I'm about to figure out now, because I can go with some blue light as well, but still it's not going to be very visible or have any meaningful impact on a light background. So I went back to the TARDIS color palette, so to speak, and went for some blues. And now my issue is going to be how to light it up appropriately while still maintaining the necessary contrast to see what the heck is going on. Um, Particularly, I don't want to borrow or bury the 2D side, the sketch side. So I ended up actually trying my hand at some watercolor bleed out for that side. So it's almost like the canvas that the raw drawing is made on is still like peeking through the actual draft. It's not colored in yet, so it's still white-ish, and that bleeds into the rest of the picture. And I like the effect. I'm not sure if it does the thing I wanted it to do, but I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm pretty biased, so I'll leave that be. But it certainly did highlight the draft side, making sure that was still very visible and very clearly different from the rest of it. And there is some color theory points to be made as well about the clear contrast between blue and white. But I'll leave that be. I'm pretty happy with it. At this moment here, I'm trying to make the light side of the light, the left side, punch a little bit more. Um, and yeah, the best way to go about this would have probably been a mesh gradient, like I did in my GC Tomb Raider project with the glow stick a while back. That would have been perfect for this, but I did not want to detract from the actual text itself in this way, and it would have been a bit too much, I think. So it's about course and no, not course. It's about doing enough and not doing too much, because it can get too busy as well. That's it. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I might actually try and make the mesh gradient blue glow stick effect like Tomb Raider, just to see how that would actually happen. Because if you make the gradients match the background, I might actually have to try that after this. Huh. Anyway, what you're seeing me do right now is just split the text into two, so that we have the left and right side again, just like with the TARDIS itself. I'm just fixing some of the inevitable extra blocks that appear when you take a closed contour and making that into its own path and then breaking it apart. So anyway, the right side is flat, and I could leave that be as just a flat color. I tried here on the left side to do the same interpolation technique that I showed way earlier with stacking different colors on top of each other to see if I could make that appear 3D. I failed miserably in that. So I tried to see if I could make like anything look like anything. I didn't. It looked weird and bland. This did not look 3D at all. So I scrapped that way faster than I anticipated. And instead, I just said, screw it. Let's just make a fancy color 2D, and just leave it at that, because even though I had made myself a bunch of thick text with a lot of fill that I could play with, I didn't have any other ideas for how I could raise that, so to speak, and make that appear 3D. So I instead just made a shiny surface, and that's where it ended up. And I decided that the other side was not contrastful enough, so I made that into a shiny surface as well. So the whole idea of 2D, 3D text kind of went out the window. Um, but I like this almost as much, and this works better in practice anyway, um, in terms of contrast and actually reading the thing, because black on dark blue is not the best. And this leaves us with this TARDIS, which is going from draft to full on pseudo 3D, and it's not where I started off thinking this project was going to go, and it's not where I ended up in any way. But looking back at it now, I think this conveys the idea that I wanted fine, and it certainly made me try out a few new skills that I hadn't really tried before and hadn't really done in a long time anyway. So it's nice to try and experiment with making things in a program that is not entirely made to do. Making 3D stuff in Inkscape is not ideal, but for this, it's good enough. And yeah, I'll leave it here, I think. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.